Giggle HQ has a security team. We don't need random Twitter people. Moving on.
Welcome to the sixth episode of the Grey Hats podcast. I think this is episode 6. Right. It got a bit confusing because last time we split it into 2. So we'll just say 6. This is actually kind of an interesting episode. We have a guest for the very first time. Yay!
Yay!
I guess I'm more excited than everyone else. So I'm Jay.
Sorry, I'm Saskia.
I'm March.
I'm Jose.
I'm Harriet.
And I'm Cyber Gibbons.
Yay! And for the next hour to an hour and a half will be the Grey Hats. So what have people read about over the last month? People must have been reading the news. Like, I've given you a month to prepare for this. Actually, I remember reading something a month ago, and this one I thought was kind of cool. It was just a GitHub issue that I came across for the Cinnamon screensaver. Did anyone see that?
Oh, this is the bypass, so you could bypass the lock screen on Cinnamon.
Exactly. And the reason why that was kind of funny to read is in the issue, the guy was saying that. Oh, I've got it here. So a few weeks ago, my kids wanted to hack my Linux desktop, so they typed and clicked everywhere while I was standing behind them looking at them play. When the screensaver core dumped and they actually hacked their way in. So it was basically a bunch of kids like banging at the screen until it crashed. So that was like really cool to hear. I mean, like it's cool to hear about kids hacking things.
Can you call it hacking if you're just bashing on a keyboard?
Well, all I do is bash a keyboard all day long and hope for the best. It's monkeys and typewriters, to be honest, isn't it? There's not really.
We used that analogy last time, and I got in some trouble.
I remembered I was delivering a training course with Ubuntu laptops, and someone said I didn't have to log in. I just kind of swiped sideways and it bypassed the lock screen. And these are people who never used Linux before. So this was Ubuntu 16, I think. But yeah, they found a way past it. So we do kind of rely on a screensaver, don't we, to lock our computers?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think in Linux it's set in stone how that works.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually an issue because it tends to happen fairly often with with the Cinnamon screensaver and Mate screensaver.
Mm-hmm. If anyone ever reads, JWZ, the ex-screensaver blogs guy, he has put out so many blogs where it's been like, I reported this issue 4 years ago and they ignored it, and now here we are. So yeah, every time I use Ubuntu, I always install ex-screensaver because it's the only thing that doesn't have about 20 CVEs to its name.
It's actually funny you mentioned that because I was reading his blog earlier, and he went on a rant about this like particular issue, and it ended with just to add insult to injury. It's recently come to my attention that not only are GNOME screensaver, Mate screensaver, and Cinnamon screensaver buggy and insecure dumpster fires, but they are also in violation of my license and infringing my copyright. so this guy is like pretty mad with these other projects. And yeah, like you're totally right.
He's pretty mad about technology in general. But I mean, Mate, Cinnamon, and GNOME all share the same code base originally, right? Mate and Cinnamon are based on what, GNOME 2, and then GNOME is GNOME 3. So it's obvious they're inherently going to share the same issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, have its own screensaver? I thought that was pretty good.
Which one?
KDE had its own screensaver, and I thought that was pretty good, actually, if I recall. It's been ages since I've used KDE. I've not used KDE for a long time either. I can't actually remember the last time I used it. Probably been like 8 years for me.
Yeah. But the reason why I kind of like this story as well is that because they said that they were just just leaning on it, the guy had no way of recreating the vulnerability. And I had a friend at university that did that very thing, but it was with an ATM. So he had this way of just leaning on this ATM, and it would like go into the debug mode. Of course, it's like a password you got to put it in, but he had no idea what it was. He just knew that if he leant on it a special way, he would get into the debug menu, which I thought was pretty cool.
Why did he learn that skill? Why was he doing that repeatedly? That's what I want to know.
I want to know
what was he gaining from
how
that?
he found out.
So it was at the student union, and I think we were just there drinking, and he just leant on the ATM that was there. It's probably just a busy night or something, and then it happened, and then ever since that time, he could just go up to it, lean on it on the keypad a certain way, and yeah, and I was like, dude, how did you do that? It's like, no idea. There was a Sudo vuln. Did people see that one?
There's always a Sudo vuln.
There's always
There is always yeah. It's actually quite a complicated vulnerability. Like if you follow it through, there's a lot of different steps there. But at the same time, if you caught any of them with static code analysis or whatever, you'd have stopped that vulnerability happening. And it's been there since 2011, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It was the commit or something, but it's been mainstream for 9 years or something like that.
Is that the one where the third vector was something like an arbitrary file, right? But they weren't able to actually control what it was. You just got a timestamp or something like that.
No, that was probably just another one.
I mean, if that's another one, that was like a month ago as well. So.
Okay. Yeah. So the one that I saw, and I guess CyberGibbon saw as well, was the heap-based buffer overflow. The write-up, it was fairly impressive. I mean, I just kind of skimmed the interesting parts, but I think it was to do with you had to run sudo in shell mode, so with like -s, give it some arguments, and if you ended the arguments with a slash, then it read the null byte instead, and then things got into weird states, and the buffer was kind of overwritten.
It's the same problem. It's just there is another mechanism to exploit it that they weren't able to get a payload into, where you had an arbitrary write. I believe it is the same problem.
Okay, they had to use sudo edit. I think because I think it like some of the flags that were being set when you run sudo meant that actually that code path wasn't used, but with sudo edit, it was. Yeah, that one actually dropped while I was on a pen test. I was doing like a build review, and I read it. I was like, oh, this is cool. So either I can exploit it in the test and have a really awesome high-risk vulnerability in my report, or I can tell the client and have them fix it and not get to write about it.
Yeah, a friend of mine asked me to try and work out the arbitrary write thing for a POC because he needed it for a test or something like that, and it was so I didn't manage to do it. But yeah, I know the vuln.
Okay.
Did they release a POC? Because when it came out, I don't think there was a POC for it immediately.
There's not one in the disclosure, but they've given enough info there that I think anybody with reasonable skill could have probably written one, and it's probably out there now.
That sounds about right.
There was a way to test whether you're vulnerable or not. So if you did it to just A's or whatever, you could get it to crash. But yeah, at the time there was like nothing that was actually exploitable, like that you could use in the test. But it was what do you think if you find, like, I mean, if someone releases a vulnerability and if you're in the middle of a test, would you exploit it or would you just like inform the customer beforehand and so they can fix it?
I'd inform the customer. I'm not going to test like my code on a customer's box, and it's going to take, I don't know, it'll take me a day to build the right VM anyway that I have all the testing stuff on, so it's just a waste of testing time. I'd just be like, hey, look, CVE's just dropped. Here it is. By the way, this is critical, so patch it.
If something's ready to go, if I can just compile some code and I know it's good, I can test it on something I've got running already, then I'll use it to go further. But like Mark said there, you don't want to waste your time developing some shady proof of concept code for a customer when you could be just looking for another issue that also gets you root anyway. You've got to be, and fixing it as well. When we report stuff, I always like reporting by how you fix things. So if there's a patch out already, just tell them to patch it. Job done. That issue's closed off.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people they get a bit obsessed with like getting those high issues in the report or whatever.
It's still a high issue, right? I mean, it's still something you'll put down as high. There's no proof of concept. I think even CVSS has something for no proof of concept available, right? One of the scoring things. So yeah, you put that down, and then you're just like, right, blah blah blah. And I mean, half the time with stuff like that, the hardest part is actually trying to find whatever, I don't know, the mitigation is before there's a patch in case they want to apply that. And there usually is some weird mitigation that you can find or something, like, I don't know, not allowing someone to use sudo edit in this case. Because to be fair, who actually uses sudo edit? I've never used sudo edit. I don't think I know anyone who's used sudo edit ever.
I've used it a couple of times, but it's only when it's been someone else's machine, and that's all you can use. You know, I don't have sudo to get a shell to run nano or whatever to edit something, so you use that.
What about doesn't BSD have what do they call it? Duaz, the Duaz command instead of sudo. Yeah. I think like I've been reading about people trying to move over to that just because it's I think it's probably nicer code base, less like vulnerabilities in it.
Enjoy using BSD with its grand total of about 20 supported packages.
So yeah, that's why I couldn't use BSD full time. But I think the binary still can be used in Linux.
Probably. I'm sure it wouldn't take much time to move it over. But I mean, you've got not you can use like why is my brain not working? But set caps on things that you might need to use sudo with, and you have a lot more control over like the granularity of the privileges you're giving to things, so you don't necessarily really need sudo anymore that much, right?
Just run everything as root, you're sorted.
I know you're maybe joking there, but now that we're moving towards like microservices and like DevOps and just like spinning a box up like immediately to just do one tiny little thing, sudo and just running everything as a relatively high privileged account's becoming less bad.
Point.
I'm not saying that just run everything as root, but you can kind of go near that nowadays without too much harm.
Yeah, that's actually I think a really valid point. Things that are quite isolated and doing one thing and the risk is low, I guess it doesn't really matter that much. Still feels weird.
The argument I'd make is that I've seen a lot of like jail type things that, I don't know, manufacturers or whatever have built themselves, and they've not been great. But if you're using something well known like Docker or something, you're probably fine, right? And you're configuring it correctly, I suppose.
Yeah.
Wishful thinking.
I guess there's that caveat at the end. Like, if you're doing it right.
I mean, the real thing to do would be to have like sudo used all the time, but have like, I don't know, a grsec installed and everything else, and make things extremely difficult to exploit. Like my personal server is a Red Hat server with grsec custom compiled into the kernel and all that business. You're not going to exploit that with sudo. Come at me, bro.
I'm also not going to put that much effort in it, so...
Yeah, I actually don't know how I built that image at all, and I cannot replicate it whatsoever.
But so is that why you always use like really old versions of software? Because you got it configured and set up to be super secure, and then you just don't know how to upgrade it?
Yes, exactly. I used to use like one very weird, I think it was like a 2.6.18 version that had no known vulnerabilities, and I was like, this will do perfectly, even though we were on like 4.0 at the time.
Yeah, that is classic March, I think. Saskia, you're gonna say something.
Yeah, so like Chippy and I did look at a couple of slightly less technical stories this week, so that our listeners wouldn't drown themselves having to listen to so much technical stuff.
Are you saying that I'm boring?
Drowning. Chippy was telling me about a story where a hacker broke into a system that treats drinking water supplies near town.
But I think, Jay, you messaged about this and I was looking at it, and it doesn't even look like it was the most technical hack, unless I've got that really wrong. Like you could actually, someone was watching the monitor and they could see the mouse going across the screen, making the changes. And then the person was like, well, I'll just change that back then. But surely if you've got access, that's sort of a strange way to go about it.
No, that's quite
common. No one's watching.
That's quite common. There've been a few people caught like that same way. But
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I like the boldness of it.
Yeah, that was quite a good one. Jose, did you read about that?
No.
Oh, okay.
I did.
That's killed that one.
So basically, they ended up cranking up this lye. So this is like sodium hydroxide, which I believe helps to decompose bodies.
Yes.
And it almost poisoned 15,000.
Jose agreed way too quickly on that one.
Very confusing how that's related to any kind of software vulnerability.
So it was that. So the hacker or attacker or whatever threat actor was trying to poison the water, so that they managed to put some lye into the into the reservoir, and yeah, luckily it was kind of found in time and fixed. Because yeah, that could have been super dangerous. And I mean, that's the thing, right? You get all these power plants and like, you know, national infrastructure stuff hooked up to the internet. This kind of thing is going to happen. That's kind of a scary thought, really.
This kind of thing has been happening for like 10 odd years,
20
if not
years.
more. 20 years, yeah.
When was Stuxnet?
Stuxnet was 2011, but there were instances after that, and there were instances before that. In the early
Before
2000s, there was some. I want to say he was a disgruntled employee in Australia who tried to poison a water supply by like overflooding a sewage plant or something like that. There used to be a page somewhere that collated all of these. I used to do a lot of SCADA stuff when I was younger, so I've like
Why
read
is
a
that?
lot. It's too stressful.
When you mean when you were younger, when you first started your career as a pen tester?
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, it was an easy.
I'm
It was an easy
surprised
target.
NCC would let juniors just do SCADA stuff.
Well, that's because he's just so elite.
They had a lot of trust in me.
Because of all the experience he had.
Exactly. You know, all of my previous experience before working at NCC.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I've hung out in the like SCADA circles and stuff for a while as well. But generally, the software is really insecure. Like Siemens Sematic, the software that like Stuxnet targeted, for example, have a HMI, which is the panel where you would do this kind of thing. That panel back in the day, 10 years ago, had a 3-character password for the VNC, and it had there was passwordless on that authentication, where from which you basically had admin on the underlying Windows CE operating system. Like SCADA software was trash. What was cool about Stuxnet was that it was like replaying things and making it look fancy and involved a great deal of understanding of the underlying protocols. Not so much that SCADA has been secure ever, because it's not. It's been terrible.
Because it's never really been designed for security. So like in this case, it was TeamViewer, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. With I think just their old version. I read that the plant wasn't even using it. They hadn't used it for 6 months because they had moved over to some other like remote access software. But it was there with a weak password and someone logged in. Andrew, like I think you do some quite interesting stuff, right? With boats and whatnot.
Control systems and stuff. Yeah. TeamViewer is quite often to blame for serious issues. I mean, there's only so much I can really say about some things, but I've been sat on my sofa and I've had control of a cruise ship using TeamViewer. The thing is, TeamViewer punches through firewalls. It will find a way out if it can. It's really capable of doing that. So third parties love installing it because they know it will just work if you've got any holes. And like was just been said, then you could replay commands with given protocols or stuff. But if I can just get the HMI, the human machine interface, and just click on buttons from an attacker's perspective, that's so much easier. If I want to steer the ship left or right and press left or right rather than work out 400 different things I have to send, I'd much rather do that. But then you've got that risk of getting caught. You see the cursor. But in the cruise ship situation, let's just say it was a less important system, something that if it broke, people would be annoyed, but it's not going to hurt anybody. And I was moving the mouse all over the screen, and I pivoted through other things, and they could watch it. A screen in the control room would have had this going on, but no one went, why is this unimportant system suddenly accessing the ASI pods, which are the big motor things underneath the cruise ship that steer it? And it's just, things like this are hard to solve. Water plants, they want things to work.
Yeah, and they need to be able to access them as well.
Apparently, this was blamed on like a really critical lack of cybersecurity funding at a local level. So it doesn't really feel like they were putting a lot of resource into this. They were kind of doing the best they can.
But still, though, I mean,
it's going to be an issue when you're looking. I mean, this is CNI. This is critical national infrastructure. This is people's drinking water supply. This is the kind of stuff that you should be protecting. You really, really should be protecting this kind of stuff at a very serious level. And if you're not seeing that there's a risk there, then like the issue isn't the software that you're using. The issue is the attitude towards the people that you're supposed to be protecting.
Well, I mean,
And
the
I
US CERT has been sending out like advisories about SCADA for easily the last 20 or maybe 30 years. So this is arguably just a case where they're not even paying attention, right? They don't care. And you're right. It's totally an attitude thing.
Yeah, I mean, literally, apparently, I've not seen it, but apparently there was a TikTok of the attack. So this is how serious they were taking it. Was somebody videoed it and put it on TikTok as it was like, because lol, you know, oh look, something's moving on the screen and I don't know what that is, lol. Oh look, they've just put sodium hydroxide in all the drinking water, lol. You know, it's like a combination. I think it's a combination of attitudes towards the security and the safety of those people.
What is a TikTok?
Dude, come on.
Okay, old man.
Yeah. So I think in this case it was, as I said, they had actually replaced TeamViewer with something else. So you know, this was just something they forgot about, and that is totally a like attitude issue. You know, I have a lot of patience for companies, organizations, and stuff that are trying to do the best they can, but when they have legitimate, you know, issues like with the NHS, you know, they can't always just get rid of every Windows XP machine because it's
because of cost and because they're horribly underfunded.
Exactly.
And sometimes there isn't an alternative as well because of legacy software.
But in this case, if it's just, you know, the software was there and it was just left, I think that is a slightly different thing, isn't it? Like if they've managed to replace it but not like decommission the old stuff. But speaking, like Chippy, when you mentioned about the mouse being like moving and being seen, what didn't that happen with Gary McKinnon, if I remember? So he was this hacker. He hacked into a load of like US systems. I forget how, like almost 10 years ago, I think. And I remember reading at the time that they kind of saw that he was like moving the mouse and stuff. Ali, you'll know a bit more about this.
Why would I know anything about Gary McKinnon? I've never met him. I know of him. I want to say he was caught because he was spending his time attacking out of like 4,000 DoD computers, and their networks are going to have monitoring even back then. I'm pretty certain it was a combination of things. I believe he was also like blogging about it on whatever his social networking thing was back in the day, and he'd been using the same nickname forever, which was attached to his real name.
Do you notice how Ali started with, why would I know anything about that?
I would not.
Then knows everything about it.
You know that Ali knows nothing.
Exactly.
Oh my god. But yeah, I definitely remember reading something about that. And again, this was 10 years ago, so I was this was even before I was working in security. I was a software developer, but I was reading about it at the time, and yeah, I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. So
are you trying to segue? Oh man, I'll segue for you. It's fine. So whilst we're sort of thinking about like America and maybe like negligence and not wanting to look after your citizens that well, Chippy and I did see another story that was in Motherboard today, which was about a data broker that was selling location data from a Muslim prayer app.
Oh.
Do you remember that one, Chippy?
Yeah.
Do you two only do research together? Do you only read the
We do
news?
everything together.
We do everything together.
And
okay.
it annoys you. I know this.
Like seriously, the separation of lockdown is just pain for me and Chippy.
Okay. Continue.
Just to clarify, isn't it better that they actually do research instead of like me, who doesn't even know what topics we're talking about?
I guess so. Maybe Jose, maybe you can join them. You could do some work, and
They never invite me.
oh, okay. Next time. Well, the first time, last month, we all tried to get together.
Oh yeah,
Do a
I
bit
didn't.
of and you didn't turn up. So
Me and Jose were otherwise occupied.
Yeah,
exactly.
doing your own podcast, you mutinous bastards.
Yeah, but they got
Oh,
no one to
wow.
edit it though. So
Oh yeah, they're
So I'm-
trying to mutiny. Well, to be honest, we're all trying to mutiny against Jay.
Am I
Me
not a
and
good
Saskia
host?
might break up too.
Yeah,
No way. Then it's just me talking to myself.
just have the Chippy and Saskia.
Just like any other night.
Okay, so basically, the synopsis of it is Google kicked an app off the Google Play Store because they were selling location data of Muslims who were using this Muslim prayer app, so that, like, I guess the government could spy on them. And we thought it was quite interesting because in one of the previous episodes, we've been talking about how it's just like totally okay to sell personal data to the government in the States, and how that's like a bit shit.
Yeah, was it the app creators that were selling the data? Or was it someone who had breached the app?
So reading about it here, it looks like the app had a kind of location analytics provider called Predicio in it. Predicio, I'm not sure how you say that, but that has been linked through a complex data supply chain to Ventel, who are a US government contractor who sells location data to immigration and customs enforcement, which is not a great combo.
I think we should call them Predicio because, you know, let's see.
Predicio.
No,
So they,
it's a double C.
yeah, they've not given any comment to Motherboard. But this is the thing, like once your data leaves your phone and it hits one of these, you know, analytics providers, whatever, you've got no idea where it goes, to be honest.
So does it say why the app manufacturer was using them?
It doesn't, or I can't see it.
Okay.
It says it was in their privacy policy at one point.
Yeah, but I mean, having it within a privacy policy. I mean, yes, you can have it within a privacy policy, but that's what Andrew and I were actually talking about earlier today. Is like the deficiencies of privacy policies. The one that we were specifically looking at hadn't been updated for 58 months, so you know how accurate it would be is questionable. And that's why one of the things about the GDPR that is quite important, and something that is particularly coming into effect now because of the Privacy Shield issues, is that you need to actually try and track your supply chain as much as you can. So you need to be looking at your third-party processors, where they're pushing the data to, and trying to understand where realistically you can, what their supply chain is as well. So my assumption of this is that the app creator will have created this app with the intention of selling data in the long run. It's probably a free app. And it's probably done in such a way that they knew they would sell this data through a supply chain at some point, and that will have basically been like the target for doing it. I could be wrong because I haven't really researched this, so this is based on entirely no evidence whatsoever. But my hunch would be that a lot of apps literally are just harvesting data for reasons that are not why they say the app was created.
Yeah, so he might not be wanting to sell that data to give your location away to the US government, but to target adverts, to, you know, say where the users are, things like that, to other advertising companies. But once you've let things go to that third party, you lose control of it.
It's to provide wider analytics, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure. But when I question the ethics around the Giggle app, like what's the business model for it, my hunch has always been that it's to provide the data analytics of all of these women, whether it's aggregated or not. The reality is, once you hit that supply chain, you don't know what's happening with that data. And when you are dealing with stuff that's sensitive in the way that location is, and it's sensitive in the way that, you know, sort of this quite data that's relating to relationships, or all of these sort of different messages that are going backwards and forwards, even when you anonymize that, you're not actually anonymizing it. So it's how it's processed at later stages that becomes quite scary. And again, like one of the things that Andrew and I had been talking about earlier, which was like the ethics of people who don't understand tech, setting up tech, like a tech solution. They often create the problem they think they're solving by doing so. But, you know, I think that's something that we can talk about in the later part of the podcast. But this to me seems like a really good example of that.
I mean, I've just downloaded the app whilst we've been talking, and it is just absolutely full of analytics. Like that's not the only provider it's interacting with, or it's not. Sorry, to be clear, it's not the only provider that it's got code that means it could interact with them. But this is just it's getting horribly common that apps have 5, 6, 10, 15 different services where your data's going to. And all the app does is ask for the permissions at the global level, your, access to the external storage, the camera, to your location. And you don't know which one of those 15 is getting that data. I don't know how you manage it. I don't know how people get on top of this.
It's interesting because really, like, phones having those like separation of privileges, like, oh, you can allow access to the camera, you can allow access to blah blah blah. It was an attempt to give people back a good deal of control from their data, like compared to, you visit a website and every website has a Facebook button and then all your data goes to Facebook, that kind of thing. And it's interesting that people are just subverting it by instead embedding, I don't know, 30 analytics providers into their apps, and you don't really get the control over what data is being sent across that. It's just great idea, poor implementation, and people being shits.
It's like whack-a-mole, and this is totally what March always says about like vulnerabilities, as it's vulnerability whack-a-mole, but now it's become third-party whack-a-mole. So like we've shut down Facebook, we've shamed them, we've stopped this from happening. Now there's this sort of like transparency that has to happen there.
I mean, Facebook is still sending and selling data. I wouldn't say they're exactly the world's leader in privacy. They've literally just
that massive issue that came up, that 60% of all of the apps that have been created with the free development packages that they had given, pushing the data directly to Facebook, was exposed.
Yeah, but I mean, is that going to stop them? It's not going to stop anything. All data privacy is dead, and I've said this for years. Privacy's been dead since the early 2000s, even.
So I have a question, right, for everyone. So users, so I feel that users shouldn't really be expected to understand the ins and outs of data security and privacy. I know that Jose probably disagrees, but I think that they shouldn't necessarily have to know that. If my nan wants to install WhatsApp because, one of us has said this is the way that you can get pictures of your grandkid, your great grandkids or whatever. She's going to install that, and she's not going to understand any the data she's giving out.
Tell her to use Signal and use Tor.
Yeah. Is it up to the device manufacturers or the operating system to protect the users in this case? We're talking about more control over the what the app can actually do. But maybe there should be a bit more responsibility there to not either not allow apps that will do that, or to let people opt out of it.
I mean, it's still technically the user's responsibility, but it would be nice if it was available in a way that was more accessible to people who don't understand security. But just legally, it obviously doesn't. That if they're putting it in a huge list of conditions, if technically you could find out for yourself, then they're kind of covering their bases, aren't they?
I disagree. I wouldn't think it was okay to sell a car that just kills people randomly and say you should have checked that it doesn't kill you.
Read the fine print.
Yeah, but
we told you that the brakes don't work.
It said this car kills people.
But if it was in tiny fine print that says this car, and then it says it in something, this car may cause spontaneous combustion of passengers in extreme situations which are highly unlikely. I just really feel like we push a lot of responsibility onto end users, and not everybody has the understanding. And to be honest, actually, a lot of the people who create software and hardware don't understand the implications because things aren't properly threat modeled, and we don't understand abuse cases properly because we're all white men, with the exception of Jay, who's a black man, and me and Chippy, who are women. But if you look at information security, it's 15% women. So we don't consider abuse cases that don't fit in with our own risk profiles. And I think that this blaming of the end user is kind of an easy way to kind of shift that blame.
Okay,
I don't think...
Follow-up question. I'm sorry, Chippy, that is now your statement. Is staying in the podcast.
No, that's fine.
We're going to make it wear on a t-shirt. Blame the end user.
Fine, I'm gonna double down on it. Yeah.
Chippy says you can't fix stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow-up question. How much blame should go to the developers then? So I mean, you know, a company says, hey, we're going to start spying on everyone and stealing all their data. Go write the code that does that. Does the actual coder, the programmer, have any responsibility there, or is it just
I don't
lies
think
with the
blame is a
organization?
really helpful word here, Jamal. I think really we should be talking about educating people properly and supporting them to create software that is usable. I think if we're going to talk really in the terms of blame, then it would be more about corporate culture and exploitation culture through money.
Blame all of the companies and the developers. I mean, Google have complete control over their engine, right? With Dalvik or whatever it was. What's it called now? Art or something? Or am I confusing the two? And I mean, Apple have complete control over their runtime too, right? I mean, they have a walled garden. There's nothing stopping them from implementing something that says, hey, look, these are also the third-party providers that are taking data to blah, blah, blah. I mean, they can you could do that stuff by hooking calls and things or making things do in a certain way. I mean, that's something they could do. And obviously developers should take some responsibility. But I mean, the US certainly has a...
This is the week that Google fired their entire AI ethics team. Like literally the only buffer between Google creating responsible software and the outside world, mostly women, interestingly, they just fired them over the space of 2 weeks. So I mean, I would say it's the big organizations, not the individuals within them.
I want March to expand on his technical solution to the
Go
problem.
on, March. Is it kill them all?
It is kill them all, yeah. No, I'm just saying that there's nothing stopping Google from getting a complete list of URLs for these third-party providers, updating it every 2 months, and then literally implementing that inside their runtime and checking, okay, this is involving them.
Google itself is an ad company, so
Yeah.
they have no incentive to do things like that. I mean, other than I guess,
they could cut out their competitors.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Other than just stop other people making money doing it, but yeah, I don't know. I think I personally feel that those companies, they should be taking some responsibility.
The third-party analytics market is trash, and someone should do something about it. But all of tech is based in the US, and the US government is not going to do anything about this because it's a big fan of capitalism, and Jose, you can talk more about how great capitalism is, but I think personally it's evil.
I mean, I could talk about how great capitalism is. I just wouldn't put the US on it because that's not capitalism. It's just corruption. But again, I'm not sure how Google or Apple could stop something like that. I mean, you're talking about building a blacklist. Okay. I mean, how effective is that? How long are they?
Let's be fair.
They could do a policy. Names? They could even do it from a policy level. Like, you're not allowed to do this.
So from a policy level, they would forbid people, developers, from doing what? What exactly are they gonna put in that policy to stop? I want to because it's easy to talk in a general.
Listen, Jose, don't make me look like an idiot here, okay?
But
just to interject, sorry, no, carry on.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking. So one of the problems here is that we're talking about some vague policies to protect people.
Exactly.
But the thing is, when you're a developer, you're sat at your desk and there's 6 other developers around you and your manager, and you're being asked to do something unethical that you consider unethical. You need something really concrete to turn around and go, no, what you're asking me to do here is illegal or against our corporate code of conduct. The problem is if you look towards architects, if you look towards chemical engineers, all these different people, they have professional standards that they can say, I'm not following that, I'm not doing this anymore. Whereas with software engineers, because it's so formative, because we don't really know what to do, we can't build those policies so easily, and we it's really hard to give the people on the ground the tools to turn around and say, no, I'm not doing this without
I
getting
completely
sacked.
agree. That's why my first interjection was to ask March for his technical solution, and then to ask Jay for his policy solution, and none of them gave me a concrete answer
I can
because
give
it's
you a
not a simple
concrete
problem
answer, but
to fix.
I can give you a
Okay.
concrete answer, but
Give me a
this is
concrete
something that
answer.
I've been banging on about for the last 5 years, which is we don't have national occupational standards, which means that without actually someone has written some national occupational standards for cybersecurity, but they're not quite fit for purpose in my opinion. But we haven't been working against national occupational standards. And we certainly haven't been working against international occupational standards, and we haven't been doing that across IT. Even with the Computer Misuse Act itself, it doesn't actually have a definition of computer. Like, we don't benchmark against anything. So if you don't have occupational standards, you can't have ethical standards. And again, segue. Chippy was saying that the new Cybersecurity Council is supposed to be launching in next month, is it?
Yeah, March.
In March. That was the one that I bid 1.2 million quid for. Do you remember? when I was like, right, okay, I'm going to do a Cybersecurity Council. Who wants to join me in really fucking this up?
That's the attitude, so that's good.
So, I mean, just to finish on the previous topic, though, before we move.
I mean, she said
as Saskia
segue.
was saying,
What a wasted
well,
segues.
yeah, but,
Wasted my segue. Jay, creative editing.
but she's saying that we don't have the standards, which is true. That's just factual. So if we don't have that and we have nothing to benchmark against, how can companies be expected to be blamed for this if we're not providing any guidance? We're not deciding as customers and as users. We're not deciding this is our limit, this is what we think is reasonable, this is what the standard that we want you to uphold with
That's
your
for
application.
governments to decide, and that's where you create the standards. So the GDPR. Ooh, yeah. The GDPR was like our first step towards that, and as a regulation, it doesn't really have clause. It was a very, very first draft, but it should be providing a baseline for us to build upon. This is stuff that's kind of new in terms of society, like the Industrial Revolution and then the Computer Revolution are things that society suddenly had massive paradigm shifts. And it took a while for society to work out how it was going to secure against industry, stopping children from being smushed to death whilst cleaning machines, seat belts in cars, all of this kind of stuff. It takes time for those standards to be put in place. But one would assume when it comes to technology moving quickly that we should have started earlier and actually created that baseline and say that innovation for innovation's sake isn't a good thing, and it actually should be measured and controlled. Not from the point of view that innovation is bad, but where innovation creates security issues, then it can be bad. But nobody wants to do that when things are new. So there's always been the opportunity to do this, but it hasn't been taken on board. That's what caused the .com revolution, and that's what's put us in the situation we are in now. It's also probably the same reason we have terrible global warming problems. Society as a whole can't really do much. I think it's more governments need to band together to make a decision about whether they accept this or not.
Okay, so we mostly are in agreement here.
Except you're an anarchist.
So the things, the thing I would note would be, again, I would repeat myself, if we are not doing anything about it, society is not doing anything about it, government is not doing anything about it.
When you say we, do you mean security?
We the people.
People are doing stuff about it, but the problem is that the most compelling thing that you could do is opt out, and no one's prepared to do that.
Well, you also said that nobody wants to write the standards and take a stance. So
no, I do. I've been offering for a long time to write the standards. I am that shitty.
But nobody wants to pay for it.
I am that right that I would literally write the standards. I keep offering. I even offered DCMS that I would write the standards for £500,000, and they said no.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. So if we don't have that, how can we sit here and point fingers if we're not telling the companies, this is wrong, this is what you need to do instead? this
Because
is
it
how
takes
you should
time.
develop.
Because influence takes time.
Okay,
You can't.
That's fine. I accept that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, because it takes time, during that time, shit's going to happen and companies and developers will go wild because
Which is
as
why you don't
users-
blame the individual.
Yeah, I definitely see things that they are changing. Like back to how things were, a decade ago. Like people are a bit more aware. But let's move on.
And also, just to clarify that, society won't do anything, and that the government should do. Well, the governments just represent society.
Exactly. So they're the elected bodies. So they have to make a decision about what priorities are.
Saskia, did you want to go back to your previous segue and move on to the DCMS stuff, or we move on
I
from
mean, we
there?
can. I just thought it was really funny that I bid 1.2 million pounds to irritate people and disrupt the system, and it really disrupted the system. And now they've decided that they're going to go ahead with the council, and it's not disrupted anything.
So bringing it back to something slightly more technical, the CD Project Red breach. Did anyone read about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Jose finally read something.
Did you buy Cyberpunk 2077 or whatever? Yeah.
I did.
Not yet.
I bought it for like, I don't know, half price on the
Ooh.
day before it came out.
Have you
I
played
don't know
it?
how this happened, but I played it for like a solid 18 hours on the first 2 days, and I've been trying to stop it updating because each update ruins the fun.
By fixing the bugs, do you mean?
Yes.
Is this-
I remember you
it's
saying
so-
it was a really bad
Is
game.
this the attack where they're threatening
Yeah.
to publish the source code?
Yeah.
I really want them to publish the
But
source
it's
code
like,
because I want to play the
seriously,
original
who would
version
want-
again.
Who would want the source code of this game?
everyone.
I want it. Oh my god, the first day was incredible. I fell through the floor like 6 times. I came across a gang that were all looking at walls and couldn't move. My characters all T-posed throughout one of the opening cutscenes.
Oh my god.
And a motorbike flew through the air from I don't know quite where and twatted me in the middle of a very cinematic battle. Also, there was a bit where someone jumped on my car or motorbike. I can't remember what the cutscene was. And instead of doing what they were supposed to do and shooting me, just T-posed at me. It was the first day of Cyberpunk 2077. Really, I thought it was going to be a bad game, but this was beyond all expectations. It
God.
was so bad. It was amazing.
I heard.
Oh, and also nothing would render.
I need to say for context here that March really knows what he's talking about because he actually is an avatar in a game.
Mhm. I am a character in a Cyberpunk game.
He is a character in a
made by a-
cyberpunk game. So do you remember, Chippy, when we were talking the other day and I was describing March physically to you?
Yes.
Yeah, like jeans, hiking boots, leather jacket down to his knees.
Yep.
That's literally how they've drawn him, and it's
Yeah.
perfect.
It's
It's
perfect. Yeah.
absolutely perfect.
I've even got the long hair again.
I heard with Cyberpunk 2077, right?
Yeah.
I heard that there were some bugs that meant that people couldn't even complete the game. Like the last like cutscenes and things would just break and crash and all kinds of
Oh
things.
yeah, you couldn't. Sometimes your character wouldn't even like interact with other characters. Other characters wouldn't appear.
So that the hackers stole the source code for this and Witcher and a few other bits and
Yeah.
bobs, and they're trying to sell it. But like, it's like trying to sell one of my Python scripts. It's only going to work on my computer. The bits that are reusable elsewhere are going to be minimal. It's going to be art. It's going to be texture packs. It's going to be all that kind of stuff. That
I'm
like, the
going to
engines-
compile it.
Allegedly, they also stole parts of the engine, so that would be
Internal documents as well. I heard that they sold, or they stole and sold.
The ransomware is called Hello Kitty, and it was also deployed at a Brazilian power company. So one wonders if this was accidental.
Well, so where CD Projekt Red? They're Poland, right?
They are
Yes,
Polish,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
they're Polish.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of been like part of me is like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Release everything, especially since imagine if the code is released and like all the people just fix the bugs and there's like a bug-free
there
version.
is a lot to be learned from a code base like that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, exactly. But then on the other hand, obviously, this is a company that's trying to, try to make a living, and having someone.
They're also completely independent, so they're not
Yeah.
like backed by any major publisher or anything like that.
Exactly.
So yeah, and they started really small in Poland, and you know, just like the last maybe 5-6 years is when they actually, you know, grew a lot because of the success of Witcher 3. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of like people's hard work that is going, you know, to someone else. We don't know how it's going to be used, if at all, but it can be bad.
So one question is, what was the motivation? Because to take someone's source code and then want to auction it off requires, I mean, it kind of feels like malice. Like if I just wanted to get some money, I'd ransomware them, and that'd be job done. But they're auctioning the code to someone else.
They're auctioning it because they couldn't sell it.
Yeah, that makes
They couldn't ransomware successfully. CD Projekt Red put
Yeah,
out a thing
they'll
saying
have
they're not going to
backups.
pay anything. Yeah, well, one would wonder based on the code for Cyberpunk 2077.
Well, okay, maybe that raises the question. Like a lot of ransomware incidents, you can't auction the code because it has, or the data because it has no value. You know, like so many businesses, if they lose their data, it harms the business. But if it goes to someone else, the impact's a lot less.
But if you publicize it, you're doing damage to the company, and you're telling other companies who get hit by the same ransomware later that you mean business. That this isn't just something that's going to go away. No. If you ignore them, they will punish you reputationally, I suppose. They'll prove that they hacked you. They'll prove that they got all this cool stuff, and they'll publish your company's secrets.
I mean,
guess.
they did prove by releasing samples of the codes, and I mean, CD Projekt Red did confirm that it was their code. So
yeah, I think that they actually did. They've already sold. They sold it, right?
supposedly.
Allegedly.
So basically, allegedly they started the auction, and I think the auction would run for like 4 hours or something. And amidst the auction, they closed it and messaged people saying that it was a private buyer or something had contacted them with an offer, and they accepted it, and the auction wasn't going to happen anymore.
How much did they sell it for? $1 million, I think I read.
I don't remember. I think it was more than that.
So I saw two numbers. There was $1 million.
Just to get into the auction, you had to pay a biddy.
Okay.
I mean, I find the idea that anyone's going to pay $1 million for some game code somewhat farcical, especially game code that was received so badly on release. I think that was a fiction.
Yeah, but I mean, you're just thinking of Cyberpunk here, and like I said, it wasn't just Cyberpunk. There were other games involved. So there was the Witcher.
Yeah, there was the Red Engine and all of that, but
there was the Red Engine.
But even that was previously very badly received when it was released. I don't know if you remember, but The Witcher 3 had a lot of bugs on release.
Yeah,
that engine is probably completely unusable for anything besides The Witcher 3 because.
Okay. I mean, it had lots of bugs when it was released. Yes, true. Like any Ubisoft game, whatever. So games have bugs when they're released. That's no surprise. That doesn't mean that, you know, The Witcher 3 didn't become one of the best games like ever. So there's still value.
I mean, I disagree with that, first of all, because I don't like The Witcher games that much. You're just a grizzled white dude doing grizzled white dude things. It's not my cup of tea. But the other point is that the fixes are going to be very Witcher specific, right? And the engine itself, you can probably get the same thing, but if you use you license the Unity engine or something else for a lot less money. I don't see the financial benefit for paying £1 million unless you're Elon Musk and you're bored one night.
I do wonder whether it was just somebody with, you know, a lot of money and they bought it more for preserving the code, being able to access it. Because you're right, unless the internal documents that were sold with it, unless they contain anything like particularly useful, I can't see why someone would buy that, unless again they just want to be able to access the code to preserve it.
I think like there's like, just let's say that a developer in China bought it. Okay, China would be a huge market, more than enough to make a profit on whatever they spent on the code. And, you know, they'd be protected because PCC would, you know, prevent CD Projekt Red from taking any actions against a company, you know, within their country. I mean, I'm not saying it's they won the lottery here, but there is value and there is money to.
Well, so
to
you think that they could make like using the same engine, replacing assets, and make a new version of the game, or just compile it and sell the same version?
No. They could use the code base to make a different game.
Okay.
I mean, there's this history of like back in the NES days, Chinese companies would make bootleg copies of games, right? But that wasn't that easy because they would actually face legal action in various places, and the PCC isn't really gonna step up and protect some bootlegging company. It's it's too much hassle.
Plus, I mean, for $1 million as well. For $1 million, I feel like you could just make your own engine for that if that was your goal.
You could license your own engine. Yeah, you could license an engine that'll do the same thing. I mean, the assets are the only thing you're really going to be losing out on here.
But you can
strip assets from other things.
Exactly. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. We'll see what happens.
Talking of failed ransomware, 3 North Korean hackers who were associated with WannaCry in 2017 have been accused by American prosecutors in association with APT38, which is the Lazarus group. Did anyone read about that?
Oh man, that was a while ago.
It was literally
but I don't really trust any of that.
Your news was week. Your news was last week, but me reading about the Lazarus group would be a while ago.
Yeah, I mean that would have been, but the prosecution was last. You just wanted to knock my segue, didn't you?
No. You asked if anyone read about that, and I mean, I don't remember anything.
It was in the Washington Post, although I can't read the article because it's behind a paywall.
We can have.
There are ways around the Washington. Never mind that sentence. Edit that out, Jay.
I will edit that out.
So apparently this is to do with like a conspiracy to steal 1.3 billion pounds in cash and cryptocurrency.
Oh, my argument here is that I think the problem here is that it's very easy for them to point fingers at random military officials and say, "Oh, you were behind this." They do this repeat like regularly every 2 years with the Chinese, and they're like, "Oh, so and so general was behind X, Y, and Z attack," and there's like, well, there's no evidence in the thing. This is all based on like everything you have in it. You're even using the Mandiant names. This is probably just the U.S. government posturing, which it is.
Yeah, because I always
and good luck
extra shadow brokers.
No, the shadow brokers and all of that are unrelated.
Okay, so that was just a 2017 thing.
The shadow brokers were the guys who allegedly broke into what was allegedly an NSA ops box and posted like the code that was then used for WannaCry later.
Right.
But after that, everyone had their access to that.
So, Alice, do you believe that was the case?
I don't know, genuinely. I think if it was an NSA ops, do I think it was an NSA ops box?
Yes, for example.
I don't know. There was a lot of notes and a lot of weird stuff there. There was a lot of documentation. Seems weird that they'd have all of that documentation on like a VPS that they're using to launch attacks.
Well, they'll need the documentation for their operators.
You'd imagine they'd keep that locally, right? On a Confluence or something.
Well, maybe they're deploying it. The guy operator is new. He needs to
needs to have it on the box so he can cat it and read it in Vim.
I mean, so you think that wouldn't happen then?
Yeah. I think with like a group like the NSA, putting your documentation on a box that you don't have 100% physical control over, and that could be ownable, is unlikely.
Didn't the MOD have open Trello boards? Or was it MI5?
I don't know.
Definitely one of the UK government departments. I think it was MI5 or MI6 had non-private Trello boards that had like passwords and the tickets.
Not surprising. I could definitely believe that.
Andrew looks like he knows something about this.
I do remember finding some Trello boards with some very interesting stuff a few years ago, but none of them were government, I don't think. They were just, FTSE 100s.
I'm sure
nothing
there was
big.
a big old scandal about there being some, like, literally intelligence agency stuff on open Trello boards.
It was definitely a thing that was happening a few years back. I mean, still now, but particularly a few years back before people were talking about it.
I do think that OPSEC in government departments can be really challenging when you're talking about offensive stuff, because if you look at somewhere like MI5 or 6, everything's about data flows. Like you do not allow data to go the wrong way. Like people should not see data that shouldn't. But then when you start attacking systems, there's a connection that doesn't involve, like a data diode or someone stopping you doing that stuff. And I can totally imagine how you leak things like that. I mean, we've done it. We've written a custom bit of malware for a red team, and then some idiots uploaded it to VirusTotal, and it's game over. Like it's like, oh, is it going to be detected? Things like that. I can see how it happens, and it
all like more polymorphic encryptor, like encryptors though. Then it's okay.
But yeah, I think everyone makes mistakes, and I don't think the NSA or whoever does it here or whoever does it in China is above reproach, to be honest.
If it makes you feel any better, Andrew, my experience of trying to buy anything from VirusTotal takes so incredibly long that no one will ever be able to find this malware that you uploaded to VirusTotal, because they will be caught in the sales loop until the end of time.
I don't even have a paid VirusTotal account anymore because their pricing has changed and became so much of a hassle. Last time I had to use VirusTotal, it was easier to email one or message one of the developers on whatever I was messaging him on and be like, "Hey, buddy, we've talked before. Do you mind if I just have some of these samples because I'm looking at them?" VirusTotal is so annoying.
Macs have had some malware on the M1 chips.
Was that your segue?
No, I'm not doing segues anymore.
Really bad segue.
I don't care. I don't do them.
I don't.
Whatever. Yeah. This is a full stop. Next segment.
So yeah, the Mac M1 processor based laptops have got some malware on them, but I think this has been blown out of all proportion. It's like essentially it's a different processor, and it's got some slightly different exploit mitigation stuff available on it, but you can write malware for Intel, you can write malware for an M1. It doesn't really make much difference. But the weird thing about this report is the malware doesn't appear to be doing anything, and they can't work out how it got on the machines. So it's just kind of like...
That is the interesting thing for me. Like, I definitely, obviously, I agree. Like, the fact that it's just like malware for the M1 processor, like, that is not super interesting.
No.
But I couldn't figure out where it came
The
from.
M1 is just ARM, right?
It's an ARM architecture, yeah. It's an ARM architecture processor, but really, it's appled.
Yeah.
It's really quite complex.
Like, I think it has like a load of stuff like on the chip, like memory and stuff, so that it's like a lot faster and things. I mean,
if it's ARM, there's going to be a way to write malware for it fairly easily. I mean, there's an ARM malware for... Oh, you've got one.
I do. Yeah. And,
wow.
And Chippy's getting one soon, as soon as it delivers, and Rob as well.
Can I tell you about a better company? It's called Microsoft.
They produce the best products.
So this is the part of the podcast where we go to our sponsors,
Oh my God, it's
Microsoft.
Not a sponsor.
You can just
Ali,
jump on a
Jose, would you like to tell us why Microsoft are the best company in the world?
Because of
Absolutely. They produce the best products. They have the best customer support. And they don't have weird malware that doesn't do anything, right? Malware that targets Microsoft boxes is really interesting.
It does stuff. It breaks your computer. It ransomwares it and sells source code to other people. Whereas this M1 stuff does nothing.
Well, that's just free backup.
It's exciting and thrilling.
Computer needs.
So yeah, this malware, it was I couldn't figure out like where it came from. I read a few articles and it just seemed to be there, which is kind of weird. And there can't be that many like M1 devices out there yet, because no. I mean,
I think they've sold millions. We're talking huge numbers.
Okay,
that's the thing with Apple. They sell huge numbers of devices. They drop something new like this, people love it, but just there's got to be a vector to get that malware onto the computer. Is that an ODE in one of the bits of software that runs on it? Is it that people that buy M1s just download things and run them? Because this is one thing I don't like about Macs. They really encourage you to run unsigned software. Like it just kind of becomes a normal thing, in my opinion, on a Mac. Maybe it's just the software I download.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. Since it's not doing anything, could it not just be some analytics thing?
No, so there is a write-up of it.
This is the thing. If you have a Mac, it can't be infected. It's impossible. It cannot be infected.
It's impossible. So, Andrew, I think that's actually a really good point, because I know a lot of people buying the M1s at the moment, and this is the reason why I have one, is because I want to like play around with the iOS like emulation on it.
Yeah.
And so I know people have been like downloading like weird, binaries to be able to do that, especially since, if I remember correctly, like, Apple, they did stop you from like running like running some apps on the
It's not Apple. Yeah, so it's not Apple. So the developer of the application has to like allow it or enable to be executed on a Mac.
Okay. Yeah. But there was a way to sideload them onto the like the emulated device, but Apple
True.
changed that. So like when I was looking about that, people were coming up with these workarounds and saying, install this and whatever. So yeah, I wonder if the malware was spread that way, just because people are trying to figure this out, and there's not necessarily as many people looking at the tools that are now being released for this.
So
but there is a good write-up. I've just had a chance to read about it.
I think it's really easy to coerce users to install software that's not signed, comes from a dodgy source.
Yeah.
You don't really have to do that much, and it might not be malicious as such, like directly. I mean, this thing could not be something really dodgy, but yeah, like you say, it could be that people want to emulate iPhones on the M1, which is technically possible. They download some software, install it, and away you go. But it's kind of hard to tell at the moment. There's not enough info.
This malware is really weird, like for a bunch of reasons. But I mean, it's using AWS S3. They're going to get that pulled easily enough. Apparently, they're using Akamai for the like callback. I mean, this doesn't seem like it's actually malware as much as it seems like it's just, I don't know. For all I know, this could be some really weird analytics thing. They say hello world in one of their binaries, and you did it. This sounds like it's more an incomplete analytics thing than any actual malware, right?
Maybe it's just an incomplete malware.
They ran out of time. Decided to push it. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see how it goes. What was that?
Incomplete malware that was deployed anyway.
Well, accidents happen.
It could be a proof of
They do.
concept. It could be someone wanting to prove a point.
Yeah.
Actually, something that's innocuous out there. I don't really understand it. There's not enough detail there for me to like make a judgment about this yet.
Yeah, I'd need to actually get the binaries to have a look, to be honest with you, to see what's going on. But this definitely smells like it's something that's not actually malicious, to be quite honest with you. Even if it's in 29,000 max, but it doesn't have any obvious payload. It doesn't look like it's really trying to do anything shady, right? I mean, you don't go to AWS S3 as your downloader to.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's like the bits that matter here is how did it end up on the machine. The architecture is irrelevant. It's an M1. You can compile code for it. I don't get why the news is leading with that. It's weird.
I could compile code for anything. I mean, an M1 is just an ARM box. I'm pretty certain it shouldn't be too difficult to compile things for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess time will tell. Does anyone else have any other stories? Because I got one more that I wanted to talk about.
No, I think Chippy and I are out of stories.
You can be separate people.
Look, don't you have a go at me and Chippy. You had a go at everyone today that they didn't do enough research, and Chippy and I did our research, and now you're being as salty as a bag of peanuts.
I'm sorry. Thank you for doing some
We
research.
take the podcast very seriously because we were bored of work and wanted to do something different.
In that case, the last thing I wanted to talk about, and this was just something today, CVE 2021-21972, which is an unauthenticated RCE in VMware esxi. Just dropped a few hours ago, I think. Did anyone get a chance to read about that or see it?
You sent me the link, but I ignore all the links you send me, so.
Because I'm a hacker.
Yes,
Yeah.
certainly. You are a hacker, Jamal.
I'm untrustworthy. No, this one was cool. Again, like it dropped like just before this episode of the podcast. So I've not had a chance to read it fully. I had a quick look at the write-up, which was in Chinese, and it looks like a very simple, like I say simple, but simple thing, where there was a directory traversal in an upload on an unauthenticated endpoint on VMware esxi, I think, and the vSphere client. So you could just upload a like a shell, or like an SSH key or something, and write that to disk, and then unauthenticated access. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of people tonight scanning the internet for for these devices, and having some fun.
Well, I use Hyper-V by Microsoft TM for my virtualization needs, so it won't be a problem here.
It does look like a really simple vulnerability.
Too simple, right?
Yeah. It kind of, I'm surprised by this. Like, I'm only just reading it now, but it doesn't look like it's the most complicated thing in the world.
Nope, it looks.
So it's an upload
straightforward.
and a command injection vulnerability.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was surprised to read it. It's like, it's almost like a CTF, or that kind of thing. Hacking 101 type vuln, but it's there. Like, as I said, like I read that it was unauthenticated. I don't know whether that's true. There are some mitigations, so you can disable the. I think the vulnerability is in a specific module, so you can disable that and you'll be protected. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing like how people start, scanning for this over the next few days and stuff. Yeah. Okay, cool. In that case, shall we take a quick break before we move on to the next part?